What is up, FNL podcast listeners? This is your host, as always, Jake Hirsch, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 12 of the show. I just got rained on, big time, soaking wet. Yeah, I just got back from sushi, and I was coming inside, and it was a torrential downpour on me. And it was probably God punishing me for eating so many rolls of sushi. But I can't help it, because that shit is good. You know what I'm saying? It is good as... unbelievable. On a different level. I went to a new place today, too, to check it out. A little happy hour action. And, sushi was damn good. Anyway, I want to say what's up to Waza. That's the name of my spot. I think that's going to be my new spot, because their happy hour is like from 4 to 10, man. Who's got fucking happy... How did that even start anyway? Happy hour. And it's like for 6 fucking hours. It's weird. Someone needs to get on that. Someone research that, please. I think I need an assistant for the show. Someone just to go take care of all the little shit, book guests, keep on top of stuff, edit, produce, put the stuff out there for me. It's very, very labor-intensive work. But, I don't know. Maybe I will run into somebody that's willing to do it. Maybe I'll get Jasmine to do it. She's a good helper. Anyway, yeah. How's your week going so far? Mine is going superb. Good, for the most part, I think. Yeah. A little funny thing happened today, though. My aunt was over visiting, and this is before we went out for sushi. And I was taking my daughter out, and my aunt came over, and she goes, "Oh, you know what? I think I'm parked in the driveway, so you can't get out of the garage. So I'm going to need you to move my car for me." And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." And then I thought of a great idea. Maybe let Jasmine move the car. She's getting her license soon. She's been working at getting her license, getting some practice driving in hours. So, yeah. Let Jasmine take the car out. Move it down the street for me. Or move it out of the driveway, rather. And so I reluctantly gave her the keys. And it's really weird because it's like, I don't know how many of you people out there are parents. I'm assuming a lot of you are. But having your kid drive can go either two ways. It's either you're completely happy and you're just like, okay, I'm going to be supportive and I'm going to be not like my parents who, if you came from the old school of parenting, who probably fucking yelled at you and berated you while you tried to figure out the clutch or how to get your, tires straightened or how do you take a curve properly or, check your blind spot or, apply the brake slowly without, coming to a screeching halt. I remember when I was little and my older brother learning how to drive stick shift and my mom just like tearing into him, like yelling, "Stop, brake, clutch, push in. What are you doing? Take the fucking car, like stop the fucking car." And we're just like jerking back and forth. And I'm in the back seat laughing maniacally and scared all at the same time. But it was funny because today I handed the keys over to Jasmine, and I'm like, just something hit me. Like, oh, shit. I don't know if I should do this. There's like this incessant need to protect your child. And it's like, and it's weird because you can like foresee things happen. Like you can just picture things in your mind happening that go horribly fucking wrong. And my next door neighbor, Debbie, who is like kind of the property next to me, yeah, I was going to park the car. I was going to park the car close to her house. Just kind of get it out of the driveway so I can get down and take the car out of the garage. And so anyway, I hand the keys to Jasmine. Jasmine gets behind the wheel. And she pulls out perfectly. Everything's fine. And I guess she didn't hear me say, like, just pull it up like 5 feet. Just enough for me to get the car out. She thought I wanted her to go park it like in the little stall, like in front of Debbie's house. So off Jasmine goes, driving down the street, and I fucking lost my shit. I'm screaming, stop the car, because I thought she was only going to pull it up 5 feet, and I'm yelling, I'm waving my arms in the mirror, like, and I'm sure this is her view in the rear view mirror is me running like she just carjacked my shit, and I'm like waving my arms, stop, like, pull over, what are you doing, really? And she makes the turn into the stall, and there's like a kind of a community mailbox there, like instead of having everybody has their own mailbox, it's like the community mailbox there, where there's like 30 or 40, post office boxes, and she pulls in there, and she's still going at a pretty good rate of speed, and I'm thinking to myself, she's lost control of the vehicle, and she's gonna plow through Debbie's fucking wall, like she's gonna go right through her fucking living room, and I'm just like going bananas. I'm yelling, stop the car. And of course, she's got the window up because it's 110 degrees down here, so the AC is blasting. She's probably got Katy Perry playing on the radio. Like she has no idea that I'm even chasing her at this point, I'm sure. And she pulls into the stall perfectly, stops, puts it in park, like everything's fine. I come up to her window like a fucking crack addict who you did not give change to when you stopped at the light, and I'm like, what are you doing? What's going on? What? I need you to pay attention to me. Listen to me. Poor Jasmine, man. She's looking at me like, what the fuck did I do? What's your problem, man? What's your fucking major malfunction? And I'm just going like, you didn't hear me? No. You did. I told you to only drive 5 feet. Oh, I didn't hear you, Dad. I thought you wanted me to pull into the stall to get out of the way. And so I'm like, well, do you think you could drive it back? She's like, well, I drove it here. But I'm like, okay, well, then then I become a fucking engineer, right? Then I'm like, well, you got to negotiate backing up, and you got to, take into consideration there's other cars, and there's a garbage can there, and there's the street. And I'm just like turned into this maniacal, uncontrollable element of just fucking stress and tense and anger into a little ball. And she's just looking at me going like, what is your fucking issue, man? Like, like, if there could be any time when a child pulls out a narcotic, a drug, and just gives you, here, it looks like you could really use a joint. Just calm the fuck down, man. You got me all spun out. You got me going crazy. And yeah, I'm just like, what the I don't know what it was. I just flipped out. I went nuts. Because I can, like, picture her careening through the mailboxes, through Debbie's living room, and finally the car coming to a rest in her fucking master bedroom. And there's drywall everywhere, and there's dust, and, the dog's dead. Debbie's got tire tracks on her face. Like, I can just picture everything, right? A lawsuit, paper, the Houston Chronicle out here taking pictures, neighbors gathering around, ambulances. Nope, she was fine. And then she reversed out of the stall, and I'm like walking next to the driver's side window. And don't get me wrong, it's not like she's never driven before. I've taken her out to like parking lots and, empty spaces, and let her drove, let her park, let her, turn signals. And I mean, the whole night, she's not naive to driving at all. But it's just something about letting go that is terrifying. And I can't even imagine letting her go out for the first time without me in a car. I'd probably going to be devastated. It made me think back to a story. It's story time, folks, with Jake Hirsch today. And this tall tale, even though it's not tall, it's actually very, very true, happened when I was about, probably about 14 years old. Oh, yeah, I was probably about 14 years old. And my stepdad, nobody was home. My stepdad had left, and had left his brown truck in the driveway. And we lived on this kind of like an acreage. A little bit of farmland, right? And, the houses were spread apart pretty good distance. And, quiet neighborhood, just not a lot of traffic. Barely any traffic. I mean, you could go probably a couple hours without seeing a vehicle, easily. And so he's gone for the day. The family's gone. I stayed at home by myself for that day or whatever. And instead of sitting inside playing, video games or masturbating or whatever the hell a 14-year-old should have been doing at that time, I'm outside washing the truck because I was like, I'm going to, I think he said I could probably take it over when I turned 15 or got my permit, or I don't know, whatever it was. Whatever it was, I was consumed with the truck. So I was outside washing the truck. And I come up with the bright ideas. I'm going to take this little thing for a little ride. You ever done that? You ever taken the parents' car for a ride and without them knowing about it? I'm sure you have. I think everybody's done that once. But there I go. I hop into the driver's seat and I start her up. Everything's great. And I take off. I drive in the neighborhood. And I'm going up and down the road. I take a couple of side streets. I'm driving around. And I'm not just driving. I've got my arm up against, like you put your arm around a passenger. I got my arm up. I got the windows down. Like I'm driving Miss fucking Daisy. And I'm just enjoying life. Sunday drive, man. Just out there whistling Dixie with the birds and just enjoying the drive. And everything's fine. Everything's great. And I pull in back to the house, to which point my flip-flop gets caught between the gas pedal and the brake. And as I try to jerk my foot out of the brake pedal, I, of course, stomp and accelerate on the gas. I'm not quite sure what happened, whether it got caught or whether I pushed the wrong pedal, or I like to think that I got caught somehow in there. Makes me feel better anyway about the story, so we'll stick with that. Anyway, I accelerate at a very high speed the moment I'm turning into the driveway, and I go flying into the fucking ditch. Full on. Truck is just completely in the drainage ditch. And the back end is, I'm high centered, right? So there's no getting out. And it's funny because if you ever been in a car accident, you get rattled. Like there's just that point where it's like you get stuck and you get hit and you're just like, this is not normal. This is not good. Like I've just been rattled by this accident and you don't really know what's going on. You're still in shock. And I jump out of the truck and I look down and the lawn is fucking torn apart. The truck, the front end of it is buried into the ditch. The back of it is high centered. So it's off, center axle. So the two left tires are stuck down, and then the right, I think, or I'm not sure how the thing. All I know is that the back right wheel was not down on the ground; it was up, and I'm just sitting there in complete fucking shock, going, "Today is the day that I'm going to die," because I figured when my parents come home and they see what I've done, there's just no other option. There's no grounding. There's not going to be a spanking. There's not going to be a talking to. There's going to be a fucking beatdown on all levels. There's no bouncing back from this. And as a kid, when you think about those things, you start actually thinking about crazy. Like, am I just better off killing myself before my stepdad comes home? Like, at this point, it might be a better option for me. But anyway, Jake Hirsch springs into action. I kind of gather my wits, and I said, okay, what am I going to do? What's the plan here? So, mind you, we live on an acreage. So I jump on my ATV. I had a little quad. And don't go asking yourself, Jesus Christ, wasn't that enough you could have gone and playing with? No. You want bigger toys. You're a man. I jump on my ATV. My quad. I drive down to the main road, and I flag down the tow truck. And I tell the guy, I say, listen, man, I've got $20 on me. I just need you to pull me out of the ditch. And I'm sure he could just tell by the desperation on my face, like, listen, this kid's going to get a fucking beating if I don't come down there and help this guy out. God bless him. He follows me back to my house. and he pulls me out of the ditch. And I, thank him. I don't even think he took the money. I think he just felt so fucking bad for me that he was just like, yep, no, you're definitely going to catch a fucking beating for this one. Yeah. So just, it's on me, Don't worry. Don't worry about the few shekels you're going to throw at me. Just keep it, for whatever expenses you have at the hospital or, whatever, right? So anyway, I get the truck, I park it back in the into the garage port, and I start washing it. And thank God there's no damage to the truck at all. It's pretty solid, right? It's an old truck, so it's pretty solid, big steel bumper on the front and stuff, so it wasn't, there's no damage on it, no dents or anything. And I wash it. I spit shine that fucking thing like it was just came off the lot. And then I go back and I look at the lawn, and I'm like, oh, man, like, what am I going to what excuse could I have for this, right? And about, I don't know, hour or two later, my stepdad comes home. And he's like, what happened? And I go, you know what? I can't lie. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I'm going to be a man. I'm going to be honest with you. And he's like, okay. And I said, these kids from my school came over and they asked if they could ride my quad. And I told them, yeah. And the kid wiped out in my front ditch and he fucking tore up the lawn. I mean, what am I going to do? And he was like, well, thank you for being honest about it. And I said, no problem. And I escaped death. We've got a great show for you. Robin Black is my guest. And if you don't know who Robin Black is, then you're not really Canadian. No, I'm joking. Robin is a bit of a Canadian personality, TV personality. He is the host of... he's a MMA analyst, and he's a host on the Fight Network in Canada. And he's been a really good friend of mine for a very long time. I've known Robin for years and years and years. And as you hear in the interview, he's had such an incredible journey getting to where he is. And I thought it was such an interesting and fascinating background that got him to where he is. And he's just such a cool and a really humble guy. And Robin takes a lot of shit on the MMA scene. He used to. Let me take that back. He used to take a lot of shit because people didn't like an outsider coming in and kind of making a go at MMA the way that he did. And that was through a reality show on Much Music. And but he's managed to carve himself out a nice little career for the MMA game, and anybody that can get in this business and actually work and make money at broadcasting and doing something that you really love and you're passionate about, hey man, I just think it's admirable and it's great. I mean, everybody aspires to do what they're passionate about, and he's done it. He's done it, and you're gonna love this interview, man. He's humble and he's nice, and he's just like he is in person as he is on TV. He's not playing a part, and he's not playing a character. He's just being himself, and that's what I really like about Robin Black. He's a cool dude. So I really hope you look him up. Look him up on Twitter. Look him up on Facebook. He's on my friends list. And, yeah, check him out, man. He's a cool cat. And much like escaping death in the driveway in the ditch of my house, you'll hear in the interview how Robin escaped death and went on to a great career, much like me. Okay, nothing like me, actually. I don't have the career Robin does, but you don't understand what I'm saying. Anyway, listen to the fucking interview, would you? I'm tired of this. Thanks again for listening. I hope to see you guys again next week. This Thursday, another episode drops, and lots of cool interviews coming your way. And thanks for all the love and support. And without further ado, here's Robin Black.
Recording from the heart of Calgary's Red Isle, you're listening to the Friday Night Lights podcast with Jake Hirsch.
Human beings in a mind.
My guest today is a musician, TV personality, and a mixed martial artist. He's been seen on Showcase, Much Music, The Score, and is currently an MMA analyst and color commentator for the Fight Network. He's also been a contributor to Maxim Magazine, The Globe and Mail. If that's not enough for you, you can usually find him on his downtime working on televised fight cards throughout the country. It's a pleasure to welcome my old friend to the show, Mr. Robin Black. How are you?
Hey, good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you bet. It's been kind of a long time coming, man. Like, I've been booking guests, and you're definitely one of those guys that I'm like, I keep saying to myself, I got to have Robin Black on, man. He's because we go back along, actually quite a ways, right?
Yeah, well, we were friends. We worked together. We sat and drank tequila. I've asked your advice on stuff. And, I mean, ultimately, the people you end up working with probably the most and enjoy working with are the people you like the most. And
definitely.
That's something I've kind of done a lot of over the last few years. Is sometimes even when you're busy, you find reasons to work with people that you like,
right,
just because you like spending the time with them, and usually you end up doing the best work with them.
I 100% agree with you, and you've had such a broad spectrum, but I want to start back at the beginning. And I know you're, correct me if I'm wrong, you're from Manitoba, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pinawa, Manitoba, a little small town in Manitoba.
How big is that?
2,000 people, 1,800. I think
Holy shit.
it got a little bit over 2,000 when I was growing up, and then a nuclear research plant there with Atomic Energy of Canada, so it was a weird little town. Like, it was in the bush, and you have to drive about a half hour over this bridge, and it was surrounded by water, so it was like this little island.
No way.
And all of the parents were scientists, so it wasn't like a normal small town. Like, all of the grown-ups were physicists and chemists and stuff like that. My parents were two of the only parents that kind of weren't that. My dad was the school superintendent, so he ran education for the kids of scientists, which was pretty crazy. And my mom was a public health nurse.
No way.
Yeah.
So out of all that, like, community there, you two were like, your family was probably one of the only grounded ones that, like realistic Canadian, like all Canadian family.
Yeah, we were like my father worked on a PhD in education, because if you're going to teach the kids of elite brains, they want you to be pretty good teacher. Right. So eventually he worked on that. But I mean, my dad was a school teacher who was the first person in his family to get probably more than a grade 4 education for real. Wow. My grandfather could write one word, and it was his name, Ed. And wow. That's it. And my dad's sister, I think, pretty far in high school, but all my uncles, all of his relatives, we're talking literally grade 2, grade 3 education. And my dad went and finished school, and then he got a teaching degree, and he was a teacher, and he's like, well, I'm going to go back and get my master's degree. And that was like speaking French, except for my family did speak French, but that was like speaking another language to them. I had no idea. Like, you spent your whole life in school, why would you go back? But my dad was kind of an education type guy. Wow,
that's incredible, man. Are they still there, or have they moved?
My parents are both. My dad is super, they're both really quite healthy. They're getting older. Right. My dad's in his late 60s, and my mom turned 70 this year. And they moved up to Edmonton. 12 years ago, my dad had this really crazy, weird virus in his heart, and he had a heart transplant. Although now it's shocking how normal people can be after that kind of thing. I mean, normal, you'd never know. But so he went to Edmonton for that. And it took a couple of years to kind of recover, and so they got used to Edmonton. And then in the winter times when it's cold there, they go to Vegas. They bought after the market crash, they bought a condo for the price of a car, basically. Oh, yeah. And my dad essentially is a semi-professional poker player. He's got a degree in math, and he's funny and clever, and he kind of bluffs all these people into thinking he's this old man who doesn't know how to play poker, and he takes all their money.
That's badass. That's a badass strategy, man.
yeah, and it works pretty good. He's got this weird likability thing to him too, where you're like, oh, the old guy's trying to play. Meanwhile, he's got a math degree, and he said he makes real money. He plays 5 or 6 hours a day, a couple days a week, and they're retired, and on top of that, you come out of the casino with a few thousand to thousands a week if you're lucky and things are going well. And
wow,
yeah, they're doing pretty good.
That's awesome, man. That is such a cool background, man.
Yeah, he's a weird dude. My parents are interesting people, and it was weird because my dad was obsessed with that you got to go to university and you got to,
right.
The amount of times that he said, something to fall back on, those words was crazy. But then when he got older, I guess after you have a heart attack and you were almost dead and you're like, oh shit, I might live 20 healthy years or
right.
30 healthy years still or whatever, it kind of changed his tune. But at the same time, they were always pretty much into you should, you can do anything you want to do. Kind of thing.
That's interesting. And I mean, just to kind of further explore that, I mean, I'm sure he had obviously I think people that kind of go through those life-changing events, I mean, they have it come out with a very different attitude, but it probably changed your guys' perspective on life probably quite a bit as well.
I think what was really strange to me is all of a sudden he understood his perspective after having a heart transplant and going through all that stuff. And you spend a couple of years being, they're not sure how you're going to handle it. Some people die. A lot of people, pass away in the first couple of years after. And after kind of getting through that, before that, he was like, how much money are you saving? And I'd be like,
right.
none. None at all. I'm not a gambler, but I'm a driver. This is what I want to do. How do I go do it? How much work is it going to take? Oh, wait, I got to get a second and a third job to do it.
Right.
Okay. Oh, I won't be able to save a penny, and there'll be times when you're broke. Okay, I'll do it.
Right.
And his attitude to me, I have two brothers too, to all of us was, how much money are you saving? Do you have an RSP? You should go back to university. It was all so structured in business, and he had this idea. He was, they went up to Yellowknife, and he went up to live in Yellowknife and kind of run the school system up there. In the Northwest Territories, and they did that so he could make a lot more money and they could retire at 55. And literally, I think it was 5 weeks before retirement, he got this random, the equivalent of pneumonia of the heart.
Wow.
And then that's what happened. He was sick for 2 or 3 years. He was, literally had 15-20% heart function. So, once he recovered from the virus, his heart was wrecked.
Right.
So he'd get up, he'd go to the store, get something, come back, and that's it for the day. You know what I mean?
Just completely wiped out. Yeah.
So once he got through that, all of a sudden my attitude of you must be living now because what if tomorrow never comes? Mm-hmm. He was like, damn it, I spent all this time thinking about retiring at 55 and I was 5 weeks and a coin flip away from not getting there.
Right. Right.
So suddenly he looked at, now when you talk to him, it's like, oh, are you having fun? How's that cool job going?
That's awesome,
oh, where have you traveled to? He doesn't ask about that. It's not so, the perspective is not so much like when you're old, you'll need money as when you're young, you better live. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting perspective on things and just, I mean, I'm sure it opens up your life to just a completely, different appreciation and just a completely different view on life. Now, take me back to when you were in high school. Were you one of those guys that's like, I can't fucking wait to get out of this town? Or were you thinking about sticking around? Did you know in high school that you were like, I'm not staying here?
Yeah, I knew. I actually kind of liked it because it's beautiful.
Right.
But I knew I wasn't staying there. And in fact, I didn't go back there for many years, but when I went back 10 years later, it is the most beautiful place ever. It's shocking where I grew up. Now, at the time, that you live on water and there's, a beach 20 feet from your place and there's, the Canadian Shield in force and all that stuff. And another really interesting thing about Pinawa, if you put into the computer the word Pinawa, Manitoba, the first 1,000 things that come up have to do with deer. Because on the island there's 1,800 people, but there was at one time 20,000 deer.
Holy shit.
So they would just walk down the streets. There would be 50, 100 deer just strolling down the street. You got into your yard and there'd be, 50 deer running around in the yard. When you walk through the school, and people that live there don't notice it at all. You'll see a 6-year-old kid walking through the area of the school, and he will walk past 40 deer. He won't even look at it because his whole life he's walked past 40 deer.
Wow.
So it's really weird. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But I knew I got to get the hell out of there. And I had kind of big ideas. I was weird and hyperactive and odd as a little kid. And my parents were the only thing I had any interest in when I was a kid, like a young kid, was martial arts. I wanted to do what, you know, I was really into Bruce Lee, and, you know, Jackie Chan a little bit and stuff. But then, you know, at that time I was a kid, there was like Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and stuff, so I kind of got into that. But that was all I was obsessed with. So finally, you know, they took me, this was about maybe 9, and they would drive me. This is what kind of people my parents are. And I guess they were like, oh, man, that middle kid, do something about that one. What the fuck are we going to do? But they would drive me what would be amount to probably close to an hour and 40 minutes each direction 3 days a week to take Taekwondo lessons for my whole life.
Wow. And, holy shit, man.
Yeah, crazy, eh? And they'd like divvy it up, and it was really, in retrospect, it really is surprising. But I went, you know, they took me there for a summer, 2 months, and at the end of the 2 months I competed, and I think I had a yellow belt.
Right.
And I beat 2 guys in the tournament, both of which had red belts with black stripes, so they were like weeks away from being black belt. Didn't really mean anything to me.
Right.
But I just, with the tools that I had, and then they just saw it was the only thing I kind of made any effort to kind of be driven to do.
Right.
So kind of I was that guy identified by that kind of thing. And then you know, when I got a little bit older, I was also the guy who grew his hair long and wore spandex pants in the 80s. You know?
The rocker look, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I don't know, I wasn't cool or uncool. I did have the ability to I didn't really have any real, I had one best friend, but I didn't really have any real group. I kind of was one of these sort of, me and my buddy Alex were like, of those few types of people in high school who can kind of walk through most groups and wouldn't get invited to most things. So kind of developed the ability to kind of get along with people, but I knew I had to get out of there. Yeah, right. No question about it.
Interesting. And so what was the first place that you took off to after Manitoba?
Well, the first thing you do is you go to Winnipeg, because that's quote the big city.
That's like the big hub, right, of Manitoba.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you grew up in a town of 2,000, and I was familiar with the areas of Winnipeg because I'd been going there 3 days a week, taking Taekwondo my whole life. So I went there, and you know, my dad's thinking it was like, you're going to go to university. God, I do not want to. I actually didn't really have any specific idea of what I wanted to do.
Right.
You know, I kind of wanted to do different. I would drive by this one store. I remember like driving into Winnipeg all the time, and it was this store on the corner, and it had like back then the whole store would be like a Player's cigarette sign,
right?
Like a cigarette brand.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I just can't live my whole life working in a place like that. Mine wasn't a cubicle or it wasn't business or whatever. It was just like, what if I do something that never, you know, amounts to anything? Right. I don't know. It was very strange. I always had that kind of idea. But, yeah, I went to Winnipeg. I kind of did most of a year of university. Tried to take mostly phys ed courses, oddly. Took a bit of music, some economics.
Right.
And then, you know, didn't go back the next year. And I just and I started a band because that was my other thing I was super into.
Right.
And even though I couldn't sing really at all and couldn't play music at all, didn't really know anything about music. I just knew that, you know, that when I look at guys who are lead singers in bands, I was pretty sure I could do that,
right,
except for the singing part. And I'm like, well, how hard could that be? Turned out it was actually pretty hard. But I started working, and I worked as a salesman in a gym, like it was called European Health Spa was the name, but it was just a gym. Right. It was a guy who used to own something in Gold's Gym, or one of those bigger ones.
Right.
And he named the place European Health Spa because he thought it would sell memberships to women.
Oh.
But it was just a gym. Yeah.
That's actually a pretty brilliant marketing strategy, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah, especially back then. I remember his name was Lee, and he had competed in Mr. Universe something once, or I don't know. But I was a salesman there for like no more than 7 or 8 weeks for sure. And
Wow.
I remember this being less. And then they made me manager of the place.
No way.
Yeah, so then that was my gig for the next 3 or 4 years, was managing a gym, which really managing just meant you hired other salespeople. You kept an eye on the hot tub's pH, but I probably didn't do a very good job of that. And you helped organize people to clean stuff, and you taught other people to sell memberships. Like, it literally was just sales stuff, but I made a little percentage. So I made enough money to kind of make $5, where I kind of started a rock band, and I was gonna, and unfortunately, the biggest influence in my life always was martial arts, but I kind of stopped training once I got into music, because I'm kind of single-minded, and suddenly, if I'm going to do one thing, now I'm better at it. I can do multiple things, but for me, they all tend to be involved in the fight business anyways, but
Interesting.
then it was like, well, I'm in the music business, so I don't have time to train.
Right. Oh, I'm getting a really bad connection now. Are you...
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's better.
All right.
Yeah. So like during that time, so you kind of focused more on the rock music end of things at that point.
Yeah. Really, the next decade of my life would be that, and I kind of, I'm still a pretty driven guy, but I look back at it. Playing the rock band was super fun.
Yeah.
But you eat terribly, you drink like crazy.
Right.
You go through periods of doing drugs.
Yeah.
And you kind of dumb yourself down a little bit. At least I did. I felt at the time that I needed to I've kind of built a character. It wasn't really so much like you could be yourself like you can in most things. I kind of built a character, and I got too involved with thinking that you have to be that guy all the time, and there was cameras around or when people were talking to you. So I would be talking to somebody, in an interview, and you were always playing this character, and the character started to define himself. It's like a pro wrestling character.
Sure.
But part of his character was that he was smart in ways, but dumb in others. So you kind of dumbed yourself down. It's really fun. And there was a lot of things about it I loved, artistic things and stuff, but I just, over time, don't think it kind of made me at my best, although I had a great time for a decade,
Right. And was that mostly all that time spent in Winnipeg, or have you moved out east yet?
Yeah, I moved out east, actually. So I think I'm going to be 45 in, I don't know, the 20th in 7 weeks.
Right.
And so from really 20 to the early 30s was kind of really spent in that business. The first sort of 20 to 27 was in Winnipeg, and you had to learn to perform, and you had to learn to write, and you had to learn, to really, if you're going to actually do something, my philosophy is you got to actually do it. Try to do it well. You got to try to learn it. Don't half-ass stuff. Like, you can't go through life half-ass and stuff. So, you kind of figure out how the music business works, and you figure out how, records are made and what happens. At the beginning, you think, you would hear, well, my band got signed and then we were rich and famous. You say, well, what actually happened? So you kind of learn the whole business, like how it works, book your own shows, and pay for things and raise money and whatever you got to do, and become a good performer, a good songwriter, and a good artist and stuff. And somewhere around 27, I moved to Toronto, and that's when it kind of really started taking off. I gathered up a band of like-minded guys, and by that point, I had a good handle on the big picture, and how to find what you needed. Oh, well, we're going to need a booking agent. We're going to need a manager. We're going to need to create some awareness and publicity. We're going to need songs that matter. All of that kind of stuff. And then the next 6 or 7 years, that's when I made a little money, and we made some records that got released on major labels, and we made music videos. And
you had some
I made a record with Bob Ezrin.
Right.
Who produced Pink Floyd The Wall. I mean, this is one of the biggest producers in the history of music.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was amazing. And he made our record for free because he met me and he kind of believed in me. And somehow I convinced this guy that we were the people that he should spend, off and on a year on.
No shit.
And for nothing. It was just absurd in retrospect.
Wow.
But I mean, and man, along the way you learn crazy stuff. Like things I do today, working on, little TV show talking about fighting or to prep to commentate something, or even when I was training and trying to prep to fight, things like that you do now, you learned from these great people you came across, like Bob Ezrin. This guy coaxed the wall out of a bunch of, guys who were messed up on acid for 5 years.
Right.
He has skills.
Exactly.
Right? You know, like, and you learn these weird leadership things. He really, by the end of working with him, we were probably 2 or 3 years away from kind of shutting it down. And I kind of stopped and realized a big lesson that I kind of see now in how you do stuff. And it was that really, and it's more now than ever because of the way the internet works and the way things work, but what matters is quality, like creating and doing things of high quality, the best possible work, like building the quality of your work. Whereas before that, I was like, well, I know the business, I met these people, I know how to schmooze, we made a nice package. And really, in those days, I think I overestimated the importance of that stuff. Whereas today, if you make something of ultra extreme quality, and it exists,
Right.
Some people will find it and they'll go to other people, you holy shit, you got to see this or read this or hear this or watch this or whatever. They'll tell other people. And if it is really unbelievably great and better than everything else around it, it will, all of that other shit will take care of itself.
Right,
you know?
Right. No, that's that's exactly. I mean, I was actually just talking to, I did an interview with Mark Pavlich, and he brought up Detroit City, and I had just watched a documentary called Death, and it was about these three black brothers that lived in, back in, Detroit. This is like way back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And they had recorded the first, I mean, they kind of developed the punk rock, like the Ramones style, like the pump, like the
MC5 kind of era.
Yeah, pop punk. And these guys were putting out these tunes. I mean, years before the Ramones, got the success and all that type of stuff. And they were turned down by like every major label, and the older brother, not to spoil the entire thing, but the older brother was dying, and he said, listen, one day, this came from the heart, like this music came from, this was good shit.
Because it didn't copy anything.
Exactly.
It's
so
copy
original
now.
And the sound and everything was so unique. And he said, listen, one day someone's going to come looking for the Death Master tapes. And sure enough, 30 years later, I mean, their stuff is selling for $800 on eBay because so it's such an interesting point that you bring up about if you really put out something that's quality and sounds good and unique and original, it's going to eventually come out. It's going to pop.
And whether that is a record, that's a book that you wrote, it's like some small video. I mean, if it's the word that people use now is remarkable, because what's important is that you remark about it.
Right.
There was a time where we all knew everybody in North America and England and wherever would know what the number one record in the world was, what the best TV show was, what the number one movie was, who the heavyweight champion was, etc. Right. Now, because everybody's talking and there's all this noise with social media, which can be a powerful thing, but it can also just be noise. Until everybody passes on the message like playing broken telephone, nothing really gets through. I mean, just think about what kind of world we live in. Rihanna, like this is a woman's probably sold 20, 50 million records.
Right.
She's ungodly beautiful. If she hasn't been in the media for 4 or 5 days, she feels the need to put pictures of her on Instagram topless.
Right.
Because the world is so full of stuff and everyone's attention span has reduced. And even if you have a long attention span, if you had heard Rihanna's record yesterday and today somebody showed you, 25 short videos on the internet and you just saw the knockout of so on and versus so forth, and you just started watching season 4 Breaking Bad, and the cheeseburger.com just sent you, it would be impossible to keep something in the front of your mind.
Right.
So these kind of people now feel this need to every 5 minutes show you their tits, basically.
Right.
And I mean, in her case, literally, but in other cases, figuratively, you just, everybody's showing their tits.
It's very interesting because I just had this conversation with someone the other day, and I think it's kind of like the equivalent of, and I mean, I've got all the respect in the world for someone like Paul McCartney, but he did like a guest spot on, like some sitcom like Yes Dear, or, whatever it is. Yeah. And there's well, he doesn't need the fucking money. And he's, you know what I mean? Like he's just, and I think it's just, and it's not high art that he's doing. I mean, he's, they're shooting it like on an Apple studio somewhere, but at the same time, it's like they feel this need to still be relevant and still be a part of the, I've got to keep throwing this stuff in people's faces so that they don't remember, like they don't forget me.
it's so shocking. It's like, if anything, I admire now these people who don't do it. Like, I don't, I'm on television every day, and it'll go on the internet, and somewhere between 7 and 20,000 people will watch it,
right?
And a few hundred people will watch it, or a few thousand, I don't know how many, every day, and they'll say, "That's my guy,
right?
That's my guy. I like getting my news, my fight stuff from that guy," and I think that's really cool, and I'm really proud of that. But if I'm never on television again, it will have zero effect on my life. It has none on it now.
Right.
It's cool because what I like about being on TV is that I get paid to follow my curiosity.
Right.
And my job is to, in brief, in front of a camera, spew out everything I learned about my curiosity for the day. And that's badass.
Right.
Like, that's a badass job.
It is.
But the TV part about it, it's like, it's all a stick. I mean, I try to do mine as straight as possible now, and the people that I admire are the people who just talk. They don't talk in the way that like newscasters talk. And now if I put a camera in front of a regular person and I say, "How do you think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to do next year?" A guy who 10 minutes earlier had been going, "Hey motherfucker, what's going on?" talking to his buddy and shooting the shit. "I got to get a fucking Harley." Who knows what he's saying? Normal people stuff.
Sure.
Will suddenly go, the Leafs got to put a lot of pucks on the net. Got to take a lot of opportunities in other guys' barns. You never underestimate lesser lights in the National Hockey League. There's no iron team. Like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
Yeah.
Like, like how did a regular person suddenly become this jackass just because somebody shoved a camera in his face? So to me, that's the worst thing about TV. When I see that, and I understand somewhere in society that became the automatic implied thing that everyone has to do. So there's this weird feeling that that's what you need to do.
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, there's something terrible about. There's a reality show I just saw advertised, and it's just basically another one of these American Idol shit that nobody needs, right?
Right.
But in the commercial, the whole wall is regular people, and they go, "The judges are you, and you could be on the show, and you'll be famous." It's like, is that what famous is now? Your like your Skype, YouTube, whatever upload of what you think of this person is on for 40 seconds, and that's what fucking famous is today.
It's unbelievable, man.
It's not even a thing. Famous isn't anything. Like, if Rihanna has to show us her tits, I'm going back to that one, is she really that famous? If she needs to remind us of her existence, is she famous at all? If a tree falls in the forest and Rihanna whips her tits out, like, what does it mean?
Exactly. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. No. That is such a good. It's a good point, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people that I've it seems like I've recently interviewed they're all big Howard Stern fans, and I know that in Hollywood there's a lot of people that are Howard Stern. And I'll be honest, I was never a big Howard Stern guy. Like, I'm not the type of guy to like to go out and buy Sirius satellite just to listen to Howard Stern. But like, to me, I was like, well, there's got to be something behind this. Like, there's got to be something that makes sense for people that are so into Howard Stern. And I think when I watched his movie, and I just recently watched it again because I thought, well, shit, I must have, not picked up on something the first time. But just like you said, when like he had the microphone in front of him and it was like, "Hey, it's Howard Stern," and he, had this different voice and all shit. But and it was like, you know what? It's like, if I'm just fucking who I am, and if I'm just real, and if I just talk to people the way that I would talk to them on the street or talk to them at a fucking party grabbing a beer, that's what people like. And I think, you and I think that's what interests me about you is that when I talk to you and we're doing tequila shots in the bar, or if I turn on the Fight Network and I'm watching you do a segment, or you're commentating a fight, I mean, you've got your job responsibilities to report what you want to report, but you don't talk in a different way. You don't act a different way. You're very much who you are off camera as you are on camera. And I've, like I said, of course you have a job to do. You've got to report certain things, and you have to be appropriate in certain ways, obviously, media-wise. But at the same time, there is it's an interesting parallel. And I want to get to how you got to where you are now, because you have a very successful career in television right now. But the band take me back. You were wrapping stuff up with the band. You were just like, fuck, it's just a matter of like, listen, this isn't paying the bills, and I gotta do something else now. Or how did you segue into media?
Well, like I was doing a few things for Much Music where somewhere along the line somebody interviewed me and they were like, oh, this guy's either a funny guest or people respond to him positively and negatively or whatever the deal was.
Right.
And so I started getting asked to do a bunch of stuff. I would go on those shows where they would have a guest. They would say, this show's about David Bowie, and then they would tape a bunch of guests.
Right.
And they would cut in them talking. And I started doing a lot of those things. And that was fun. But the band was like, it had reached this point, and like I said, I didn't realize at the time that the biggest thing to work on was build the quality. Like, we're happy with the songs. Our fans love the songs. No, we need bigger songs. We need better songs.
Right.
We need to. I can't. The lifestyle was a challenge, and the lifestyle kind of mixed into it. So you're drunk every night on stage.
Right.
Literally, part of the shtick was that I had 12 Coronas there. I used to break the cap off with my tooth.
Right.
It was part of the shtick. And I would drink it, and some of it would pour down my chest, and I'd wipe it and throw it into the audience like a crazy professional wrestling character.
So you're like the fucking Iggy Pop of Canada.
Yeah, it was that sort of shtick, right?
Right.
And it was very fun. And from a performance perspective, I was not a great singer, and we had learned to be better and better songwriters, but it needed to be better.
Right.
But I really would, I am proud to say that I was a very, very good performer. That's why people came to see my aspect. Some of the other guys in the band were great players. They had other things too. But if they came because they liked me, it was because I was a performer that you couldn't take your eyes off. You talked about after, you laughed or you screamed or whatever. And that's what we did well. And so I thought that was kind of enough. And so then you would pursue all these other things. And, you had this big producer, and then you had a lot of stuff written about you. And all of this stuff you think means something. But what really means something in music is whether or not you have a song that will last forever. Like we're saying about that, like Death, or what we're, where a song will literally move someone to the point that it will always do that. And that is more important than every other thing. And I didn't quite get that because it's like, well, nobody's as good a performer as us. Well, when we do our videos on Much Music, the look and the flavor, all these things, it didn't really matter.
Right.
So simultaneously, you've convinced yourself that you're a certain level of really good. You've sold a few thousand records in Canada. We've toured England 4 or 5 times, and we had people drive around in gang groups of people, 3 to 4, sometimes a little more, that would be vanfuls of people who would follow our whole tour and book in the hotels we were in. And we were surrounded by this party. It was really exciting. But you get home and it's like, well, you haven't sold that many records. And then, your booking agent is now, he broke Nickelback, so he's booking Nickelback for $1 million a night, $2 million a night, $5 million a night. He doesn't have time.
Sure.
Your website is going backwards. All of these things, and I start looking at the whole thing, and I've been enjoying performing every night. I've been enjoying the party and the people, and I've been enjoying that people love what you do. But all the other stuff was starting to be a slog, and I look at it and it's like, I can now, and for the first time in my life, I had this feeling, instead of you can accomplish anything, this sort of feeling of truth that it's like, this is as far as this is going. So what you have in store for you is work, and you're making basically no money. So I was working 2 jobs, and some of the other guys had no job. And I would work 2 jobs, set aside all the extra money that I had, buy us our plane tickets to England so that we could go on tour, because we would make enough to support us, but not enough for the plane tickets. Come back, work my 2 jobs, save it all up, go away for a weekend on 3 or 4 shows. And ultimately, it was at the point of break even, or I work extra and put the money back into it to keep it going. So you could do that for the rest of your life. It will be harder. You're going to do even more work. Now your health is starting to get a little shitty. You got a little belly. You're drunk 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week. You can't have any really kind of normal or stable relationships. Suddenly you're in your 30s, and you're basically staring at a list of things. On the upside is you can still perform what you love doing. You can still every night have these people who love you, what you love doing. You can entertain these people, and every time you see after and you come over, they want your autograph and they take pictures with you, and you're like, this is the best. We entertain these people. Look how happy they are. On that hand. And on the other hand, it's like you are going to get sicker, you are going to get older, you are going to get uglier, It's going to cost you more. Can you keep this work up? What if we got sick? I mean, this thing is not going to, it isn't quite paying for itself. It's paying for itself with all of your work plus extra work jobs dumped into it.
Right.
You're not going to have a house. You're not going to have a girlfriend outside of a girl who thinks this is cool. And even ones who do 5 years later kind of don't.
Right.
You know?
Unless you're
then they're like, that was really fun. Why don't you do something else?
Right.
So all of that is going on, and I'm questioning it. And then I have this seizure when we're in England on basically the last tour. I was doing speed, and I was drinking a ton, and I was drinking Red Bull and vodka. The last 3 or 4 days of the 3-week tour, I mean all day and all night, and I didn't really sleep in a 48-hour period. And then we did this show, and then we partied all night. I passed out. I woke up, and I felt like something's fucking wrong. Like it wasn't
Jesus Christ.
It wasn't like I didn't know what it was, but it wasn't a normal hangover and, oh my God, you really partied too hard. It was like, you're ill or something. And my pickled brain thought, well, you got to be, like, my first thought was, holy fuck, you've done something this time.
Right.
And then my brain's looking for answers, and it goes, you must be detoxifying from, this isn't like you're hungover for the last couple of days. This is 3 weeks. The only way you can basically deal with this is you better drink some alcohol slowly throughout the day and wean it off. That's my answer.
Right.
So I pick up the only thing in the place, and it's a 2-liter bottle of pear cider. And I start sipping that through the day. Now, that's super sugary. I'll fast forward to, like, 3 days after the seizure for a second. Basically, all the day goes worse. I have the seizure. I recover. I fly home, and I go to this doctor. And I tell the doctor the story, and I tell him step by step how many Red Bulls, when the sleep was. And he says I'm an idiot, like, straight to my face. Because my first, like, did I do some serious damage? It's like, I damaged myself for good. And he goes, well, you're a fucking idiot. You know, straight up. And then, like, and he was dead serious. And he's looking at me like, wow, I've rarely met people as stupid as this. and then he says, look, if you don't repeat the behavior, you're fine. You didn't wreck your body, luckily for you. And he walks me through it, and I had a hypoglycemic seizure because the alcohol and the drugs that kept me awake for so many days, I just put sugar, caffeine. I probably had 20 Red Bulls in 2 days.
Holy shit.
And he said, although the alcohol was a big part of it, the Red Bull and the sugar and the caffeine and the speed keep you going so you can keep doing it. When you finally crashed for those 5 or 6 hours, what you were feeling was, as the alcohol is leaving your body, the sugar crash, if you imagine holding your hand up in front of your eyes, the sugar, and that's the level of your what is it, sugar, I'm trying to think of, glycemic level, whatever it is, in front of your eyes, down around your knees is where it's dropped to. And then now as the alcohol leaves your body, it's drawing further sugar from your tissue. So it's now dropping below your feet. It's through the ground. And then he said when you, like, your genius medical degree, mind decides to drink pear cider, it's just sugar. You're just giving it one last blast. So anyways, I'm laying on the couch. This is hours later. And I mean, I'm physically so sick. And I was extremely hypoglycemic, but I didn't know that. I couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't do anything. I'm literally, like, moaning. And then suddenly I feel electricity shoot from my shoulders to my elbows. My arms curl like a praying mantis, and they lock. And then it goes down my hands. And apparently the last thing I said was, quick, somebody throw some cold water on me. And then I seized. And when I opened my eyes, what felt like a second later, everybody was looking down at me like if I had just got knocked out in a cage. So they're looking down.
Shit.
And I'm like, and I thought that was 2 seconds. And, you know, a couple weeks later when I've explained it to everybody and they are not nervous anymore because obviously they're all freaked out, they said that the seizing, my eyes rolled in and the shaking and seizing lasted like 90 seconds.
Holy shit.
So,
that's a lifetime, man.
That was really crazy.
When you're
Doctor
seizing.
Says you're not.
Yeah.
That's
a
like
lifetime.
Full seizure, yeah.
Holy
so
shit.
doctor says you're crazy. So basically that's the end of a tour, and we have nothing coming up. And that same feeling of how challenging everything has become, and is it worth it? And you're now in your 30s, and all of that was happening. And now I'm going, look, man, you're going to kill yourself too. You're going to kill yourself to keep doing something. And partly, yes, I loved all of the other stuff. I loved, putting on a show and those great things, and every night that people loved it. But it was also just like, I'm not a quitter.
Right.
I'm when the going gets tough, I double down kind of guy.
Right.
So part of me was just doing it because I had something to prove that we could, quote, make it, whatever that was. But meanwhile, we had played the Molson Amphitheater in Toronto and the stadium in Winnipeg where I grew up, and we'd toured England 5 times and made a record with Bob Ezra and all this stuff. And to me, not only had we not made it, we were so far from it. So I had this kind of striving mentality that was never going to get there, and it was going to kill me. So I just say to the guys, look, I need like 3 or 4 weeks off. It quickly becomes 6, and I start training martial arts, which I hadn't done in 15 years. Every day, and then 6 times a week, and twice a day, and I'm feeling amazing, and I'm eating well, and I didn't drink any alcohol for maybe a month. Now I drink alcohol on Friday and or Saturday nights, and that's my rule pretty much ever. Not that I recovered pretty well from that era of my life, but I like structure now. It's good.
Yeah, and I mean, you're very disciplined. Obviously, that comes along with the whole fighting routine, but. Yeah, that's incredible, man. I had no idea.
Crazy.
Crazy
shit,
fucking life.
It's really, really crazy. But I started training, and then that became, within about 4 months of that, my body was getting healthy again. My brain was super clear. I was in this great mood all the time, and I was feeling younger. And the training kind of never stopped. And then within about 4 months of that, I had decided I want to fight in a cage. That's what's happening. That's what I'm going to do with the rest, the next half decade of my life.
That's a fucking leap, man. Were you a big fan of like UFC at this point? Were you the guy that watched the Gracies, the first UFC type thing?
Yes. Like from the time I was a kid, I was an obsessive martial artist, and I watched the UFC 1, and I watched it, and I just couldn't believe that the Taekwondo guy didn't win. That like the karate, taekwondo, even Muay Thai. I was vaguely aware of what that was.
Right.
But somebody who kicked had to win because head kicks was where it was at.
Absolutely.
So to me, if I was shocked, but that didn't sink in for years. But I watched everything. I watched absolutely everything. And around the same era, where you're waning on your focus on wanting to keep striving for this thing, I was pretty obsessed with the UFC for a few years earlier. And then my bass player, John, played in a band called Age of Electric that was kind of pretty big in Canada. And he and I had got together when we didn't even play together to watch all the VHSs of the UFC. So he joined the band.
Shit.
Then we were watching everything.
Right.
And so I was super familiar. I knew what jiu-jitsu was. And I knew I had some basic understanding of what was going on. But within 4 months, I was training first, in the gym and stuff for 3 or 4 months. Then I went and took jiu-jitsu, and I went every night the first week for 2 hours. And then the next week I went every night and lunchtime. I still had a job. I was a hairdresser. And I would work all morning, run to the gym, train, and run back, and then let my dog out and then train all night. And then I started training 3 mornings a week, all 5 lunchtimes and all 5 evenings, and in 4 months I got my blue belt.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know about jiu-jitsu, I mean that's really hard to do.
It was weird. It was crazy. I literally closed one door and opened the other one, but the one that I opened just felt like, why didn't I do this sooner? This is exactly where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. Within 4 months I decided I was going to fight. Within 4 or 5 months of that, I'd already done this VJ search on Much Music, which is our MTV in Canada. Right. I was one of the judges on the show, and at the end of it, they said, you were the second most popular character on the show after the guy who won. We'd like to do something with you one day, and I kept that relationship going. Within 3 months of deciding I was going to fight in the cage, I had pitched a reality show pilot that followed this glam rock singer in his quest to fight in a cage. They made the pilot. Yeah, they greenlit it. I had one lunchtime, and she said, well, we can do it all in-house. And I said, we can do this, 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 and this. That's what we'll do. I set up this. She goes, who's that Canadian guy that's a big UFC fighter? I said, George St. Pierre. So could you get him on the show? I'm like, yeah, of course. I'd never met it. I didn't know him. I didn't know anybody.
No in at this point.
I knew nobody in the fight business. Nobody. Not one single. My friend Marc Andre in Winnipeg, all I knew is that he had fought once or like 5 or 6 times, like, and I knew that, and I asked him, "Hey man, will you help me?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll help you," and he helps me to this day. But this doesn't air for within 2 days of our chat, or does it air in the next day or so?
No, this probably within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, great. Yeah, so, we have this conversation in the world of podcasting, and we have a conversation, and at some point we put it out to people. Well, by the time we do, I'm flying to Winnipeg for his surprise 40th birthday tomorrow.
Oh, badass, man.
Yeah.
Badass.
But anyways, so that'll be exciting. He was the best man at my wedding, too.
I love Marc-Andre, man. Yeah, shout out to Mark, because if people that do not know Marc-Andre, the guy is he's a staple in Canadian MMA, and he's a dear friend. I've known Marc-Andre for a long time, and he's just the coolest fucking cat ever, man. I love that guy.
Yeah,
Good dude.
He's brilliant. And I basically, my bass player and I were watching all these UFCs, and he had met him once at one of his shows. And he said, "I know a guy who fought like MMA." Mm-hmm. So when I was like, "I'm doing this," and I contacted him, I didn't really know him, and I was like, "Hey man, I want to do this." He's like, "Okay, yeah, I'm on board."
Wow.
Fast forward 7 years, he's the best man at my wedding now. I'm flying to his surprise party tomorrow. But I pitched this TV show. I'm like, yeah, of course I could get George St. Pierre. And I can get Mark Hominick and Sam Stout, too. I didn't know them either. And they're like, we don't know who they are, because it's like a music TV channel. I don't even know when this is. This has got to be 7 years ago, I'm thinking. I'm just going to use the old Google-roo right here while I'm at it. But, yes, I had this TV show, and now I'm like, holy shit, I got to make it, I was already training jiu-jitsu and stuff. So pitched it, and they said, then I called them after they greenlit it, and I said, can we we never talked about my fee. And they're like, your fee? Well, you don't get a fee. Or else we can't do this. Like, we literally have no budget. So, and it's December. Yeah, and I'm like, oh. So I finally said, this is going to be 2 months of work. I can't, I might lose my job in this time. I got to train all that time. Right. I got to eat. How's $3,000 for the 10 weeks? And she went quiet. She's like, okay. So they gave me $3,000. So I had $3,000 for about almost 3 months of work. And people think that they see stuff like that and they think, oh, why did this guy get that chance? That's this weird thing that people see and the weird way that people respond to things. But it's like, you work really hard on one thing and make a relationship. You go to them and you pitch something and you have to convince them. And they get pitched by hundreds and hundreds of people, hundreds of people with brilliant ideas.
Right.
And you got to convince them of yours. And whenever somebody looks at somebody, the amount of people who are like, why does John Anik commentate that, man? Right. That guy sucks. I'd be a better commentator. They have no idea the 10 years of incredible hard work that he's done and the auditions with 100 other professionals.
Exactly.
But yes, I did a TV show about that. And then the plan was we were going to make a whole season of it. They were going to follow me right through to my fight. Mm-hmm. And then it was bought. Much Music was bought by Bell Globe Media, like within 3 weeks of the show airing.
Right.
So it sat shelved for about 4 months. So finally, I talked to a guy, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, right. I forgot about your show." And I'm like, okay, that's a bad sign. And I said, "Well, look, I can't wait any longer. I'm booking my fight, and I'm going through with it. If this gets finished, great. If not, this is the line I'm going for TV or not TV. This is what I do now." Mm-hmm. But even then, by the time I was looking at my second fight, I'm like, I'm just going to do this. Like, I'm now obsessed with solving these problems and figuring out these answers and passing a test because I lost my first 2 fights.
Right.
But I was already like, but what I'm really going to do, my purpose in life is going to be to commentate and analyze fighting.
Right.
That's it. That's what because even when I realized when I was trying to figure out how to plan for fights and learn how to cut weight and make a strategy to fight a guy and all that, it was really just to figure out how to do it so I could, probably talk about it on TV eventually. And the best way to do it is to do it firsthand.
Well, that's such a, that's a ballsy fucking thing to do, man. Because you went on, okay, so how old were you when it was your first fight? That was what, 2008?
2008, yeah. It was just before my 39th birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, and that TV show, I pitched to them in 2006, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's 8 years ago. And at that time, so there's a lot of reasons that's stupid and crazy because it's like at 38 years old saying I'm going to be an MMA fighter is a punchline on a terrible sitcom. I mean, there was a guy in Friends who did that, and like that was a joke,
right,
you know.
Right.
And I'm married now. My wife's the greatest human being on earth. I was married back then too, and it was basically like I think you're nuts. Like she absolutely thought I was crazy,
right,
that I was going to go and start this career. And I said, no, this isn't a career. I know I'm old. The career is that I'm going to commentate it. I'm going to understand it better than anybody else in a different perspective.
Right.
I'm going to have a different, I'm more enthusiastic than they are. And she's just like, you're crazy. We ended up divorcing. And realistically, there were other issues, of course, but
sure,
realistically, as much as anything, it wasn't just that she didn't buy into what I was doing. It was the fact that I suddenly looked at her and I'm like, holy shit. I'm married to somebody who actually doesn't believe I could achieve whatever I wanted to if I really committed.
Right.
And I'm really committed, and anybody can look in my eyes and they might go, this guy's a little nuts, but he's fucking committed. But she didn't see that. But anyway.
How long were you guys married for at that point?
I think 2 years or so, yeah. So that is a bit out of the blue. I mean, I can't even fault her. It's like, imagine marrying a woman and she's like, let's say she's 38. She's
right,
like, yeah, I am good. And, she's like a regular looking 38-year-old, 165 pounds. She's like, yep, I'm going to be dancing on a chorus line in Vegas in a year.
Yeah.
And you're like, are you fucking nuts? Like, you lost your mind. You would definitely be telling your friends, I think I might have to get out of this. She's literally gone crazy. I think she's literally fucking lost her gourd. So
that's a good point, I guess. Yeah, you put it in that. Yeah, I mean, like, where you put it like that. I mean, shit. I mean, but obviously you had a huge competitive edge. I mean, you obviously found a lot of success in the commentary end of things, and the color. And I mean, just for the listeners to know, I mean, back in 2008. Like probably closer to 2007, 2008, when you were filming that show, there was not a lot of, I don't think that idea had ever been pitched at that point. I mean, like now you see some shows that, obviously you got The Ultimate Fighter and stuff like that, but to take somebody with really, zero cage fighting experience to their first fight was pretty unheard of. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and now there was one in Halifax where a guy did it. And there was something in Australia or a number of guys did it in Halifax, and there was something in Australia. Mm-hmm. And that one was called Wimp to Warrior, and they were trying to pitch it in Canada. Oh, we want to do it in Toronto. And I got that's one of the emails now that I'm like, work in the business and people start to know me and they know that I'm like a decent person. I'm one of the type of people that people ask opinions of now. Right. And this guy's like, yeah, we're thinking of doing this in Toronto. And I'm like, look, dude, don't. Like, there's no television platform here that would ever show that now. Right. That like Sportsnet is about to give up the UFC by all accounts. TSN hasn't made, the UFC actually may have no television deal in Canada shortly, but we'll talk about that later. Crazy.
But it was like, no, that was pretty unheard of, but to me it didn't seem far-fetched. It seemed logical, right? As weird as that is, but yeah, the weird thing now when I look back, it's like I have a paying job, a well-paying job, and other gigs to comment fighting and analyze it. Right. And now people don't know. That are people that are 19 or 20 that, follow our show and stuff. They don't know even where you came from. They're like, oh, I think he played in a band once. But some people are like, oh, you used to fight? I'm just an analyst. That's just what I do for a living. And by all accounts, I am the first to tell you I was not a brilliant singer as hard as I tried, and I was a subpar fighter. And there's a lot of different things I've done in my life, and I haven't been that good at it. But I'm a really fucking good analyst. I'm good at that. I was put here on earth to do that. I get how to research it and how to study and who to talk to. And I put together pieces of analysis and breakdowns that I know are meaningful, so I'm proud of that. But when I started, now in retrospect, it's, I had, like, everybody hated me. Like, everybody in the fight game, not everybody. They either were nice, decent people that aren't kind of weird haters. Right. They were curious, but kind of eye-rolly. But then there were people who were like, who the fuck is this guy? Why is he getting attention? Like, Sean Pearson and Adrian Woolley. Adrian's a good friend of mine. I help him, like, find fights. Right. Now, they were like, we just hated you, man. Like, we were just like, we're working our asses off. We've been in this sport for a long time, and newspapers are writing about this.
Yeah.
You know?
This
guy with
I think even back then I didn't like you. I think your first fight was against I was managing that guy, Chris Myra. And I remember him calling me and saying, "Hey, they want me to take this fight. I got approached for this fight." And I said, "Well, who's it against?" And obviously at this point I didn't even know who you were at that time. And he's like, "Oh, it's just like this rock singer, and they're putting him in a reality show, and they want me to be the first guy that he fights or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, are you kidding? You got you got to squash this guy. He can't come into our sport and be fucking any good." Like
it's like, we got to crush this guy, and then it turned out it was a good fight.
Yeah. But I think what had happened was, and of course all the haters were like, this fight's going to end in 20 seconds. He's not going to fucking last. But you, and I think people underestimated you, because I watched that fight and it was like, this guy came to fucking brawl. Like, this guy came to fight. And the submission didn't happen until round 2, which for your first time in a cage, I fought, but this is before MMA was around. I did kickboxing and stuff like that. But 3 minutes in a round, that's a fucking lifetime for people that have never fought before.
Yeah, it was, in many ways, I think that was my best fight. And I think it was the best case scenario. Because Chris actually, to be totally honest, is not super good.
Right.
He's kind of a traditional martial arts guy.
Right.
He's an oddball, too. He's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
But, if you go to his website, it will quote that he has 60 fights in Japan.
Right.
And so those guys are generally not as good of a competitor.
Exactly.
But he's a very nice guy, and it's like, this was an era when it was like, even 7 years ago, there was, on small shows, there was still Bouncer versus ex-con.
Oh, yeah.
So, karate black belt with 50 unsanctioned fights in Japan on his website was just as valid an opponent as anybody out there.
Exactly.
And especially versus guy who wore eye makeup a year ago and fucking doesn't really know how to fight that well. But it went, I think, as good as it could have gone, because had I been fortunate enough, and at the time when I look back, what I was skill-wise, there's no way I should have yet been fighting, because, now I know what I know when I even just watch high-level guys, when I work with guys in real gyms, and, I will not ever claim to be a very particularly good fighter, but I know the game now, and I know what I did not know in retrospect.
Sure.
But had it worked out and I landed some head kick, or, I caught him when he was dry and something, and submitted him, people would have been like, well, this guy's, not good.
Oh, yeah.
And you got an easy win. Instead, I got a good hard beating for a couple of minutes. Like, my first, I come out with a kick, I get hit with something. Also, he's fighting in southpaw. I'd never even heard of the idea of southpaw. So I just didn't even acknowledge that anything was any different than normal. I just kind of came forward, I threw the kick. So I get hit really hard. And, I remember the whole lead up to it. I remember being somewhat nervous, but I had this kind of artificial, this confidence of unknowing, that some guys can get in their first fight. Like, your second fight, man, that's a scary proposition.
Right.
Because you know what this is now.
Right. You know what it feels like to get an elbow dropped in your face or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the pressure of it, and that you actually can't do what you do in the gym. And, I submit guys, you can't do stuff. Like, everyone's screaming, and it's hot, and all, like, this.
Oh, I know.
Oh, man, it's crazy. But, so, had I just somehow, and it would have been through good fortune if I'd have got him early, it would have been like, oh, he just beat nobody, and that's not being fair to Chris, because he's skilled, and he's a skilled martial artist, he's he's a good teacher, he's and he's a good husband and father, and he's a nice guy. I shouldn't say that, but he instead, I remember the beginning of the fight, and then I remember this feeling that I don't even know if I've ever had it since, but hey, and this happened in slow motion. Obviously, this was all in 1 second, but my brain went, hey, what's on your knee? Why is everyone screaming, ow, ow? And I suddenly realized what was on my knee was the mat, and why they were screaming, because they were cheering for me getting my head smashed in, and that ow was another punch, and my brain went, oh, you're in a fight. Oh, shit, you got dropped. That was literally your option, and it didn't flash in concrete terms, but like, hey, you could turn over right now, turtle up, and he'll pull him off.
Right.
But it was definitely an option in the back of my mind. Like, it was no self-conversation.
Right.
But
it was a fight or flight.
What I do,
yeah.
And what I do remember was just, there was no, do you want to choose this or want to choose that? But I remember just instantly choosing, no way it's over like this.
Right.
I sort of came out, something happened, which was something was getting drilled in the face. Then your brain kind of wakes up as if it's from a sleep, and it chooses. You quickly recognize where you are, and you decide there's no way this is ending like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I fought, and I got back up, and I took 10 or 15 more hard punches and a kick to the head and stuff until about halfway through the round when he was tired, because I'm sure he was pretty excited to be almost finishing a fight that early.
Right.
Then I was able to get it to the ground, and the judges had me winning that round because actually it was about 2 minutes in. I had to mount 3 times. I threatened submissions.
Right.
And then I started the second round, and really, the whole thing that I remember just thinking is, like, people are yelling punch. I didn't throw one single punch the whole fight. Not one punch. My brain was telling me if I can get a hold of him just right, I can submit him, and then he'll stop fucking punching me. That was sort of that was how my brain was.
The mentality, yeah.
It was like, if I can just make this guy choke, if I just get to his back, he can't hit me, and then I can choke him, and then he'll stop hitting me. Got it. And then, and I got the mount, and they were yelling punch, and I almost didn't know how to punch, and I had done lots of. Not lots by my understanding of what that is today,
right.
But at the time, plenty of stand-up training. I had Chris Hordesky holding pads for me every day.
Wow.
Somehow my brain wouldn't overcome that idea. I remember it distinctly, and I later read Dan Severin explain having the same feeling back when he was a wrestler. He didn't even know what punches were.
Right.
I just couldn't get it together to throw punches. I threw one elbow maybe from the top, not very hard, and the whole goal was to submit him. And but then in the second round, I got a sort of a front face-lock kind of position, and he was defending a guillotine. I kneed him in the head a few times.
Right.
That was pretty good.
Right.
But then he caught me. He hit me. My nose was. I remember literally the whole place went white. Like, I couldn't see at all,
right.
And kind of he dragged him back down, and I was in his guard, and then I was choked.
Right.
He got me in a triangle, but I was happy that I got the chance to show. I got beat up good, 2 black eyes, a broken nose, had a cut on my eyeball. I had a concussion. I know I did now in retrospect. Right. And the very next day, I got on a plane to England, and I did a tour of England, and that was the last tour I had ever done. Before that, I hadn't even played Canada in between, was that time that I had that seizure.
Right.
And then now I went through all of that over a 2-year period. We got a call to go back England. This touring guy in England who sort of fed this audience that liked our stuff brought us back. And 2 days later, I got on a plane. I had 2 black eyes, had a cut on my eyeball. I couldn't wear my contact lenses, which I wore at the time, in fights too,
right.
At the time. And I had a headache through the whole trip, but I sung with a headache for the whole time.
Unbelievable.
I think 48 hours later. And then that's the last tour I ever did. I came back, and so I went back over there, and it was, not as bad, but it was, now I have a concussion, and it's the same kind of lifestyle. I was very happy to see all the people who loved what you did.
Right.
But I came back and thought, I think I'm done that now.
Probably a pretty quick reminder of what the other side is still there. Like, it's still yeah. Well, and that's I mean, and it brings up like so many fascinating points, because there's a lot of people out there and a lot of listeners probably like to this show, because I mean I don't just talk MMA a lot. I think the interesting thing is that, like, you take like my older brother for instance, and like when I talk about MMA to him, it's so foreign. I mean, that's just not his thing. He's just not into that stuff, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, to put someone in that scenario where all of a sudden they are like, and I think people have a hard time understanding like what the draw is. Like, for myself, I haven't been the type of guy to be like, at the bar, like mouthing people off and getting in fights and all that type of shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I was never like a super aggressive guy. I was the type of guy where I always have this conversation with people. I always say, I'm the type of guy where you have to, scratch my car, call my mom a whore, kick me in the balls.
Grab my girl's purse.
Exactly. And then you'll see, the guy come out. Yeah. But, and like, were you like that as as well? Like, did you have that, or
yeah,
did you?
I'm not.
You need to be pushed.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever. I got in a fight in grade maybe 7 or 8, and I think I was breaking up a fight, and then the guy kind of started with me, and I was training Taekwondo, and I do remember the fact that he couldn't really hit me, and I was kicking him in the head a lot of times. And I remember, I got in, I mean, there was a couple of weird situations where somebody tried to attack me in Winnipeg one time, and I had to defend myself. But, I mean, I traveled across Western Canada wearing eye makeup and nail polish and a fur coat, and I never got in a fight. You know what I mean?
And that's a pretty unforgiving landscape, yeah.
Exactly. Like, you can say, man, I have the ability to make people laugh or buy them a beer. And it's just, also, I remember learning this when you were a kid, when you took martial arts and they talked about it, this sort of confidence that makes people not mess with you. Mm-hmm. That confidence is a quiet thing. Like, somebody's acting weird and you're like, oh, come on, man, let's go grab some beers. And somewhere in his brain he's like, this guy's not scared of me. And he may not be doing it consciously, but his brain is kind of confused a little bit. It's like, because normally when guys are scared, they puff back up or they push back or whatever, and you don't do it. And somehow, I never was. In fact, when I've seen... there's the odd crossover where people are less sort of obsessed with the minute skills and the beauty of the martial arts than I am. They'll go, hey, have you seen this, street fight video? And I'll usually say I don't want to watch it, but if I kind of peek at it out of the corner of my eye, it turns my stomach.
Right. Me too. Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching that documentary, The Wrecking Machine, with, or whatever it was, I forgot what it was, with Mark Kerr, the Smashing Machine, or whatever it was. And there was a part in that documentary that he was sitting in a doctor's office after his fight in Japan, and there was this old lady in the doctor's office, and she looks over at him and she goes, how did you get so beat up? Like, what happened? And he was like, oh, it's a mixed martial art thing, and there's two guys, they agree to meet, and they fight, and da-da-da. And she's like, that makes me uncomfortable. And I remember the line to this day, he looked at her and he goes, you know what, it probably should. It probably should make you uncomfortable. Yeah, no, he's probably right. Yeah. But there's something about martial arts to me that it doesn't. I mean, I don't know what it is, but... and there are certain people that make you uncomfortable, but the thing about it is now, to be at and sometimes when I'm commentating smaller level shows, there are some of those aspects, but it's a pretty controlled environment. Right. And, you've got doctors making sure you're healthy enough to be able to handle this. It's a lot less traumatic on the body than people think, and you got a referee to protect you, all of that stuff. But there is very few people will reach the top level and be dirtbags. Because it takes a certain amount of humility to study the things that you're not good at. Right. And the only way you study things that you're not good at is by having no ego. Right. Because egotistical guys who are good boxers don't want to train wrestling and jiu-jitsu, so they don't get good enough to get there. Sure. Those arrogant little pricks that are good at jiu-jitsu, but, 7 years after training, they're like, well, I'm just getting started in striking. It's like, why are you? Because you're not humble enough to work on your weaknesses. Right. So guys who are arrogant and angry and aggressive and mean and thuggish, none of them get to the top level. Right. You got your little weird mad scientist nerd types. Right. And great competitive athletes, wrestler-type competitive athletes, and you got martial artists. You don't have... ass whoopers. Right. Well, and obviously the competitive spirit stayed with you along with the career. You went on to fight 9 times. Yeah. And then tell me how you segued that into the media end of things. How did you get your break in the commentary end of things? Well, I really wanted to do it. And the fact that, and that's a place to start, but a lot of people want to do a lot of things, and I just studied it like crazy. Like I have my computer open. My wife's been on tour for the last 10 months. I see her every 3 weeks. So when I come home from work, I'm reading. I'm reading sometimes about the business, or sometimes, even with the television on or watching a movie, my computer is open and I'm studying. And I've always been that way. Right. And so I felt that
wanted to know the truths. Like, you can't bullshit commentary,
right,
because there are people that will call you on it. And like I said, nobody has ever said that I'm great at anything in my life. Sometimes I've tried to yell it, but it hasn't been true. But I get compliments on my commentary, even from people who've been in the business for 20 years, and I'm really thrilled by that, because it's what I want to do great. But you study like crazy, crazy. And then if you have fights coming up, you watch their old fights, you get it into the nature of it. I think a big part of it, too, is I'm poetic, because I was a songwriter, and I'm sort of poetically creative kind of thing. So
sure.
I have no problem. I won't go and write a bunch of ideas like, and Morrow, God bless him, he's one of the greats. But Morrow may come in prepared with some things that he wants to say. I know that Michael Chavello, who I also worked with, who's brilliant, he
guy.
does that too sometimes. Brilliant.
Yeah.
But I don't do that. I just fill my brain with so much stuff and then let it happen. It's a sort of, I have a train of thought process to it. I even talk that way. I don't know. If we listen back to this, I might just be talking nonsense.
No. You know what? I think that's part of the allure, and I think that's part of, like you said, when there's guys out there with catchphrases and they come with it almost like a script, and I think guys like you, I really enjoy Pat Miletich a lot of times, because Pat it's just an organic thing, you know what I mean? Or like Boss Rutan.
I like Brian Stan.
Yeah, Brian Stan is great too. There's a lot of guys that can do that crossover, right? That can fight, and these are very well versed, right? When they talk about the sport.
I try to let mine be very sort of train of thoughty. Like, it won't always work, but if and then I always it's, in my perspective, it's okay to allow. I don't think I could change it anyways. I don't think I could do it a different way, but I've done it from day one, that it's all right for people to see that you fucking love what you're doing.
Right.
Like, it's totally cool for people to go, oh my God, this guy's losing his mind. But without being one of those screamers either. But so it was something from the day, even before my first fight, I started looking for gigs. There was a small thing out of somewhere in the Midwest, Utah or one of those places. And I was and there wasn't even, there was a bit of email, people were barely using email. I wasn't good at it. I was emailing anything I could find, nothing. And then, and I was starting to kind of learn the business. I was doing, I'd done 15, 20 mainstream interviews. So by the time people met me, they were just their thinking was, we're the fight business.
Right.
Here's this guy going and talking like he knows shit. So they met, but Extreme Couture basically opened, and it was run by some guys that were new too. And they had a very kind of humble, open, Doug, the guy who runs it, is a really good guy. And my view of him early was, he may not know what he's doing, but he's smart enough to listen a lot, ask a few questions and listen like crazy. And we went in early, and I liked him. And I said, look, I don't know how or why, but I've worked in the media business for a long time. People seem to know me, and now I seem to have become this go-to guy for mainstream people to get a hold of about fighting.
Right.
So why don't I work trying to promote Extreme Couture, and let's do some media and marketing and get involved in that kind of stuff with you, and I'll be involved in any of the marketing meetings, see what we can do. And then I started pursuing media for Extreme. That was kind of my job.
Okay.
And somebody from XMMA, which I think it was their first show, they were from Quebec, came in. They were traveling around brand new shows, you probably noticed. They're like, somebody's going to put on a new show. Their ideas, let's go swing by some gyms. Like, they don't yet know managers or guys or matchmakers. They just swing by some gyms, And they swung by Couture, and I started talking to them, and I was excited and stuff, kept their contact, and then just pursued them and said, look, I've never done this before, but I really think I can do a good job. And I got that gig, and that was my very first gig.
No way.
Was them. And then I'm trying to think now. I've probably done 300 commentary gigs.
Right.
Probably, maybe more. Because at Fight Network, we've done, probably 80 or 90 deep from Japan. We've probably done, 20 Pancrase.
Right.
We've done, at Fight Network alone, I've probably done 200 shows.
Right.
But I'm trying to think of what it was after that. Maybe CFC. I had a few kind of grassrootsy level ones, and then I got the gig at Fight Network, which I also pursued 3 different times.
Right.
I went to them, I applied for the job. They were like, hey, remember this guy, this makeup singer guy? Yeah, he thinks he could fucking talk about fighting on TV. No way. And then I just kept my eyes out, and the guys who ran it, I heard left, and they had a new guy, and I went and applied with him.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, this guy, I don't think he's got it. But I had a friend that worked there who would tell me what they said.
Right.
I'm like, fuck. And then so I started, that's what it was. It's funny sometimes you start telling your own story, and you're like, I don't know how that works.
That's how it happened.
Started when I was at Extreme, I started this web show. It was on something called thatchannel.com.
Okay. And you had like a podcast show, right?
Yeah, it was like me and this other guy, Jonathan, who was an actor with a real interest in the UFC. And,
right.
And he worked at this company called thatchannel.com, and they had a little setup, super, way ahead of its time.
Right.
So what people do now, it was like a table with some screens, Skype setup, and microphones, and 3 or 4 sort of similar to GoPro cameras.
Right.
And they were set up on me, and on him, and on our Skype screen guest. And they had a producer who would switch them, and when he wasn't there, they would just switch at random. So the camera would be on me while I'm talking, and if it was you started talking and the camera was still on me, it would just show my reaction as I nodded and whatever. And it actually worked really well. And we did about maybe 15 or 20 shows, and I started learning how to just track down. It doesn't take you long into the fight game to realize that you can get a hold of these people.
Right.
Like Josh Barnett, I just called him up and we put him on the show. You know, like,
right.
Jens Pulver, like all of these kind of cool guys. We started with kind of legends, kind of more so than current guys.
Right.
Did 10 or 15 of those, and I was at. We got a Pursuit booth, same thing, spending all your own money on all of this. I didn't make a penny. Everything was free. I think I got $500 for the ex-MMA gig, which was really nice. So I'm doing all of this stuff for free. Everything's free. A free show every week, and I got to get myself up to the studio, do it. I started dating this new girl who's now my wife, who didn't know anything about what I was doing, and she's like, "You're doing what?" I'm like, she's like, "Okay." And I would go up. I could have spent time with her, and I'm going to do all these things, and then I'm at the MMA Expo, which we went and we traded. I think we might have to pay something. I was still working at Extreme, and in their beginning, money was a challenge for them, so I wasn't making much of any, and I kept my hairdressing job, doing this podcast, kind of video podcast show for free. And we go to the MMA Expo, and we stop everybody, and we're talking to them. And I see the guy, I met him, Chad Midgley from Fight Network. He had sort of in the process, had kind of become the VP. And I see him watching, because Fight Network is set up just down the line from him watching. And we're talking to Frank Trigg, and we're cracking up. We're laughing our asses off. And then we're talking to one of the ring card girls, and she's cool. And he walks over to me, and he goes, "Hey, Robin, we're doing a couple of changes over." They'd just laid off like 20 people. Fight Network, I can tell you crazy stories. Fight Network is now this very successful business, and it's growing, and it's making huge leaps and making really cool moves. At that time, it was near death. They had laid off 20 people, and he comes over and he goes, "Yeah, we're making a few changes. There's a couple of things we want to do, and I'd like to make you the face of Fight Network. If you're interested, let's talk about it. I'd like to hire you." And I'm like, "Holy shit, I got a job," And it was about 2 years of just anything I could do for free. Like Moro's show, he had me on once or twice, and he liked my stuff, so he'd bring me on a lot more often. Mm-hmm. Anything. I just went out. If it had anything to do with fighting, and in any way I could show that I had some kind of knowledge or passion or a combination of things for it, I would do it. And I just did it. Applied 3 times at Fight Network. I got applied at things that I was laughed out of. And finally, I had a job. And once I had that's 4 years ago. And once I had that job, at first there wasn't. It was just a struggling network. It was a huge network. It had $15 million. Right. It was run by a bunch of jackasses that knew literally nothing about fighting.
Right.
Literally nothing whatsoever. Didn't know anyone in the business. They paid John McCarthy $400,000 a year to be the on-air host. Wow. They paid Randy Couture $5,000 a month just to they didn't even have Twitter at the time, just to sort of be a brand ambassador.
Wow.
Just shit money, cocaine and hookers style waste of money.
Right.
And so they were so broke that Chad and Anthony came in, and a new owner came in, hired Chad and Anthony. They saved it and began the slow process of building back its credibility 4 years ago.
Right.
I came in right then at its low point. Everybody else was hanging out making some crazy money in this super slick office. But it was run by morons who had no credibility in the fight business. Within 2 months, they were the laughing stock.
Right.
All the executives. So Anthony and Chad came in, rebuilt the network. It was eventually got taken over by Leonard Asper, who is brilliant and has built it up. It's in 32 countries right now. We just signed a deal in America in 400,000 homes in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and it's making moves, like
That's
big
badass,
moves.
man.
Yeah, it's really cool. But what I saw it as at that time was, well, I want to have a job in the fight business, which was my dream, and two, I'm going to learn. If nobody's watching right now, I'm going to learn, and that was 4 years ago, everything humanly possible. Oh, there's something I can commentate? I want to do it.
Right.
Oh, I get a chance to do boxing? I want to do it.
Right.
Oh, I can, and in between I watched every old Pride show. I studied great analysts. I studied bad analysts. We acquired tiny, shitty, badly shot promotions from around places, and we recommentated them. And by the time I was actually being watched, Fight Network started, relaunched. We got into about 1.4 million subscribers in Canada and stuff. By that point, I had spent the last 3 years treating myself like I was going to paid university, where I was going to study everything possible. And I mean, I watched every fight card that existed on earth. I trained everything. I fought 7 or 8 more times, but it was all with the purpose that eventually I want to be world class at my gig.
Mm-hmm. And it's paid off. It's paid off, yeah. You know, and I remember when the Fight Network first came out, and I subscribed to it, as quickly as I could. It was on cable, and I remember just going. It was like all these, like, they were starving for content, or the content they did have was just so poorly shot back then. And it was all like, you would go from something fascinating. You'd be like, this is that show that was, in, Saskatchewan or sorry, like, Edmonton on the weekend. No, that's a show I wanted to watch. And then all of a sudden it'd cut to like, 1970s wrestling. And it would be like, Dusty Rhodes. You're just like, what the fuck's going on? And to see where
or even something good, it would be, oh man, it's Mark Hominick versus Hatsu Hioki.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't believe it. And then it was on every afternoon for the next 20 weeks.
Exactly, dude. It was, I feel like I'm blowing my fucking brains out, man. But I mean, you look 4 years later, and the studio is amazing. It looks like like it's ESPN or something like that. Just the way that the shows are shot and the expertise on the shows, and certainly you've got a lot of credit for turning that place around as well, being the face of Canadian MMA. It's what a crazy journey, man.
It is really nuts, and it's like, it's fun talking. I mean, I probably would never have this conversation with anybody else, because you got to be really comfortable and really like somebody to open up about it. But it's fun to just sort of look back and talk about something, because anybody that's listening, think about what you did 3 years ago, 5 years ago, a turning point of a choice 7 years ago. Right. Unless you say them out loud to a friend in some situation, you don't really think about the stuff that you do. You put your head down and you work really hard and you try to do it.
Exactly. Exactly. And you've got a beautiful wife that also is a performer, correct? Yeah,
man, she's the greatest. She sings and acts. She's in a musical called We Will Rock You right now.
Yeah.
It is, and she's on tour in the States. She gets home next week for 2 weeks, and then she goes back for 4 more, and then she's home for good. She's got a show up in Sudbury for a month sometime in the fall. But we're going to get 2 vacations in this year, September and December. She's super cool. Like, she gets it. I mean, she likes fighting somewhat, but she sees that I'm passionate about it. And it's not just that I think it's cool or whatever. I just have an insatiable curiosity. Like, for some reason, I feel the need to figure out what's really, really, really happening, almost mathematically if possible. Right. And now I feel the need to tell other people about it, like to explain it. I don't know. It's strange. Obsessive is definitely the right word, but it doesn't feel like it's a very natural thing for me to do, to go and study human movement. And I see it like the same way that and I don't try to on any level think my job is any more important than it is, because you're some guy talking about one thing that some people like on a small TV show. But yet, I mean, if somebody studies physics, or if somebody studies astronomy, or if somebody studies history,
Right.
they're just one person doing that and writing small papers that are going to be read by a few other people who like history.
Sure.
And I don't see it any different. Like when I go to do these breakdowns that I do on kind of larger concepts, I get obsessed with them. Some of them I'll spend weeks, some of them I'll spend months. I've been working on this kind of off time, off rhythm, sort of, using time signatures in drumming to kind of with your footwork and your hand timing to confuse an opponent who's sort of using a different time signature.
Right.
It's like two drummers.
Right.
And and that one I really am excited by. There's a couple. I did something on Uriah Faber and the way he uses his body language,
Right.
and the body language of Donald Cerrone in a win or a loss. And I did something on Carlos Condit's memory, like the way that his semi-photographic memory and the way he sort of interprets things at a different speed. They
Right.
said Wayne Gretzky saw hockey at a different speed.
Right.
High-level baseball players see that pitch coming at them slower.
Right.
Carlos Condit fights that way, and I did a breakdown using this woman's research from Harvard in that one, and I'm doing this one on off-timing things. And to me, there may not be that many people who really give a shit about fighting enough to find it curious, but there's some, and those are the ones I want to do it for. Our show, when 5 rounds, the one that we really like, it started as, this is going to be too deep. A lot of people will not give a shit. They'll watch this and go, what is this?
Right.
Because it's too in-depth.
Right.
But there will be people who are going, man, finally somebody's looking a little deeper.
Exactly.
And that was the goal from day one.
Right, right. And there's not a lot of shows out there that really get into the science behind the fighting. And I think that's a huge edge to that show. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Well, you know what, dude? It's people can find you on Twitter at Robin Black MMA. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's it.
And of course they can be seen. Robin can be seen on the Fight Network up in Canada, and obviously you do a ton of stuff, a ton of appearances. Google his name, you'll find him. Trust me. And we'll put up all the links on the website. But Robin, my friend, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving me a bit and the listeners some insight on this incredible journey and career that you had, man. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more years coming from you. It's quality, amazing work, and I couldn't be more happy and proud for you.
Thanks, man. That's really kind. And I've just had a conversation with you that I can't imagine having with too many people. It's really enjoyable on my end.
I appreciate that.
I mean,
dude.
I talk like crazy, but maybe you're a therapist.
I love it, man. I love it. So, hey, keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon, brother. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, man. Take
All
care.
right, you too. Bye-bye.